We'll go ahead and call to order the East Consolidated Zoning Board for this evening. And can we go ahead and have the hybrid in-person virtual meeting?
Do you want to do roll call first?
Sure.
Okay. Ken Kleensmith?
Here.
Ken Sanderson?
Here.
Kelly Ross?
Present.
Fred Wingert?
Here.
And Rod Richardson?
Here.
We have quorum. And the hybrid statement. This meeting is now being recorded in the board hearing room with zoning board members attending in person. There is an option for virtual attendance on Zoom webinar. For Zoom attendees wishing to speak, please use the raise hand function in the Zoom app at the start of the agenda item on which you desire to comment. Comments will be received from in-person attendees first, followed by Zoom participants. When it is your turn to speak, the moderator will recognize you by name or number listed to join the Zoom webinar, and your microphone will be unmuted. Please state your name and the city and state where you reside for the record, followed by your comments. All public speakers will be limited to 3 minutes unless the chair designates a different time period. If you have trouble with Zoom, please call 913-715-9666. Board members, staff, and presenters, please state your name every time you begin talking, and please speak into the microphone so that people attending via Zoom can hear you and your comments can be transcribed for the record. This is a public meeting. We are presenting live and recording the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We have our agenda in front of us. Is there anything to add or delete or revise on this? It looks like we have 2 applications before us this evening. Hearing none, is there any disclosure of conflicts of interest or external contacts or discussions?
This is Kelly Ross. I just wanted to disclose that I talked to an acquaintance of mine, Jamie Howell, who called with some concerns over some of the applications regarding the lighting. And so I directed her to call Michelle and then come to the meeting if she was available.
Anyone else? No. All right, we'll go ahead and move to the approval of the November 6, 2024 minutes.
Move for approval.
Kelly Ross, second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
I expect I abstained since I was not here. Board reports, county commissioner actions, and planning commission actions.
Yes, Mr. Chair, Jay Leipzig, the planning director. Just a couple of items for you this evening. The CUP application for Brian Combs, it was before you last month, located 6946 West 207th Street. It was originally scheduled for December 5th. Tomorrow's BOCC meeting. The applicant has requested some additional time to work through the stormwater study that was, if you might recall, stipulation number 7 said that the stormwater study had to be accepted by Public Works before they goes to the BOCC. They want some additional time to work out a few details on that. So that item has been continued until January the 9th. That's the only item in regard to the Board of County Commissioners. The Planning Commission actions at our November 26th PC meeting, we had an update on the broadband and digital access plan for Johnson County. Aaron Deacon with Casey Digital Drive presented an update to us on that. And then planning staff also had a short presentation on the development and review application process before the Planning Commission. And then the December Planning Commission meeting, which I believe was scheduled for the 17th, has been canceled. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions?
No.
Hearing none, we'll go ahead to the business before the board. Application number E24414PP and E24412FP, a preliminary and final plat near Metcalf Avenue and 210th Street, east side of Floyd. Michelle?
Good evening, Michelle Leininger, County Planning staff. This is a replat of 5 lots in the Metcalf 211 development. Here is the area that we're talking about. It is on the west side of Metcalf and just north of 210th Street. Here's the aerial of the current layout of the platted lots. And then here are the current plat and the proposed plat. Really, it's the same number of lots. You're just shifting the lot lines to match the proposed buildings on the preliminary development plan and final development plan. All of the required subdivision standards are still met with the proposed revision. And staff does recommend approval of the revised preliminary and final plat for Metcalf 211 fourth plat. And here's a suggested motion if you see fit, and I can answer any questions, and the applicant is also here.
Any questions of staff?
No.
Thank you. Applicant present, any comments? No comments. Is there anyone on Zoom for public comment or opinion?
No.
And seeing no one else here, we can go ahead and have discussion among the board. Any discussion?
Rod Richardson, it looks to me like this meets all the requirements for approval. Staff has clearly indicated they're in support of this. No one's here opposing it apparently. And it looks like a fairly routine change, simply to accommodate the needs of the particular development and to just make some minor adjustments. So I would be prepared to move for approval of this. So I will move to approve a preliminary and final plat for the 5-lot industrial subdivision to be known as Metcalf 211 fourth plat. The reasons listed in the staff report.
Second by Ken Sanderson. You need a second.
Everyone in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, unanimously passed that. That'll go to the Board of County Commissioners. Sorry.
That'll go before the Board of County Commissioners for action on January 9th, here in this room at 111 South Cherry Street, beginning at 9:30 a.m.
Perfect. Second item before the board is application number E24415 PDP and E24413 FDP. AU revised preliminary and final development plan for near Metcalf Avenue and 210th Street along Floyd Street. Michelle.
Good evening, Michelle Leininger, County Planning staff. This is the partner to the plat you just saw. So this is the revised preliminary development plan and then the final development plans for parts of phase 1, lots 1 through 5, and then 13 and 14. So here, same location, we've just added 2 lots at the end of Floyd Street, the south end of Floyd Street. Again, it's on the west side of Metcalf, around 210th Street. These applications include the 5 lots you just saw, and then again, those 2 lots to the south. No zoning district changes are proposed, only changes to the stipulation in the adopted plans. And then I'm going to go through and highlight some of the things in the staff report. So what you see on the left is the currently approved planned preliminary development plan. And then on the right is the proposed. You can see the buildings change from more of a office type buildings with some shared parking to contractor storage type of building with shared access drives. 54 units are proposed. Go back here. The number of buildings is not proposed to change. There's still 5 buildings, but there's an increase to the square footage of buildings and a decrease in parking, but the parking decrease is based on the use their storage facility, so not a lot of parking is necessary. Some ADA parking is, however, necessary based on the building code. And if you want to look at more detail, the changes, the summary is in table 1 on page 2 of the staff report. Here is the approved PDP for lot 13 and 14. This is not proposed to change. The only thing that is proposed to change is on the final development plan for lot 14, and that is the elevations. So this is not a change. Speaking of elevations, these are the elevations for the buildings on lots 1 through 5. They're all generally the same, except for the north building, which is half a building. So it's not the double-sided building. The southernmost building, which faces both Floyd and 210th Street, has not yet met the requirement for 30% masonry for facades facing the street. So the southern elevation that faces 210th Street shall include 30% masonry, and that's included in one of the recommended stipulations. These are the building elevations for lot 14. There's just some material changes and layout changes to the front of that. So it still does meet the required 30% masonry. Excuse me. This is a change that the applicant is requesting on the preliminary development plan. This is the 50-foot front yard setback shown in red. That is what is on the current PDP and what is required on the base district. And as part of the plan district process, we can mess with the setbacks as appropriate. And the applicant is requesting that the setbacks just in this area be reduced to 30 feet. So, lost my spot. So the red line is a 50-foot setback, and then the blue line is a 30-foot setback. And you can see that the 50-foot setback catches just the north part of building D and then the very corner of building E. The applicant has asked that this be reduced because the bulb of the cul-de-sac pushes those buildings back. And that way, if you reduce it to 30 feet, it allows for the buildings to be aligned on the same plane along the street. And so visually, that would be consistent. Staff is supportive of this. It wouldn't cause any traffic issues, and it's just minimal portions of the building. So loading area screening. The stipulations for the plan district and in several sections of the regulations, screening of loading areas is required to be at least 75% visually solid material. And that can be landscaping, landforms, fences, walls, but they have to be at least 6 foot tall and the 75% visually solid. The sides of the building are loading areas and they need to be screened. This is a suggestion that staff put in the staff report for how screening could be added as far as landscaping, just to help to screen those loading areas. Excuse me. And that would meet that screening requirement. Also, the property to the south of 210th Street that was just constructed, they have fencing with slats. That's also an option too. So that needs to be taken care of, and it is a recommended stipulation. Staff is recommending adding an additional stipulation tonight regarding lighting. We've currently had a complaint about the lighting on the new storage buildings to the south. And so as to not recreate the same issues, staff is proposing the addition of a stipulation to further look at the proposed fixtures before building permits in order to make sure that they meet regulations and address potential glare. And Kelly, I did speak with Jamie today and let her know what we're doing, and she was all good. The applicant has agreed to the stipulation. And so staff does recommend approval of the PDP and FDP with the stipulations in the staff report and the addition of the stipulation you see below. And here's a suggested motion, but I will go back because the proposed stipulation is on this slide. I can answer any questions, and again, the applicant is here for any questions also.
Thank you. Appreciate that. One question I had, this whole area we had originally done as a preliminary plat?
Preliminary development plan.
Okay, so that's why it's familiar. Okay.
Yep.
Sorry, any questions of staff?
I have a question, Ken Sanderson. In essence, then we're really modifying the radius on this cul-de-sac to accommodate these two pads to sit on these two lots. Is that what's basically?
No, you're just, so the
Blue is-
cul-de-sac's constructed,
Oh,
the
setback, okay.
setback.
Okay, it's setback. I
Yeah.
see the radius now, my bad.
The property line is not changing, nor is the street. It's just
Okay,
the building in relation to the.
building in
property
relation
line.
to the cul-de-sac, okay.
Yeah.
That's, I see it's the relationship to that. And then lot one, there, it just stays like it is, right? Lot one that's there to the north of this subject. Is there a building there now?
No, that's a detention pond, isn't it? Judd? Yeah.
On lot one?
Well, no, lot one is
It
actually,
shows two buildings there with parking or storage units along
So-
lot one.
so this is lot one, if you look on your screen. So it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Where, are you talking about north of there?
Yeah, I'm talking about north of the two subject lots we're changing. You need another screen. The,
Going the wrong way.
it's this one. There you go. It's that 1473. It's that one there.
Right
That
here?
just stays like it is, right?
Yes, these projects only affect those 5 lots outlined in
right.
blue and then
The two at the
the 2
southern
to
end.
the south.
And the
Um,
lot in between stays the same then, right?
Yes, that one they just finished construction.
And then to the west, it looks like there's a building and some construction there, and that all stays the same. That's been approved, and they're in there.
Well,
And
let me caveat that. The north, that's actually 2 parcels.
Yes.
The one to the north is approved, the one to the south is approved for a building, though they
Okay.
are using it for
That's
exterior.
lot
storage.
17 there. Looks
Yeah,
like it's
they
17.
are subject to some
Okay.
code enforcement at this point.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I share the concern about the lighting on the current buildings. Just for history, on the current buildings, is the lighting can you explain the lighting that was approved originally? And is that the way the current buildings are illuminated? Is that correct? Or?
So the final development plan that was approved with, I think typically it's 3 large, they're almost like pads of lighting that, were approved with them. They're downward directional. They're 16 feet off the ground. That was what was approved. When we got to the building permit stage, they, added, there's some additional little lights on the building that are by the doors. They added those and we stopped them with that and they went through the process to give us the information on that. And they still met the requirements for the spillage off of the property and such. So they've all met the standards. I think part of the issue is that the front of that site that's along 210th Street, there's a pretty good elevation change. So I think what you're getting is you're able to kind of see under the lights, even though they are downward directional. So we are working with the property owner to address that. And that's why we added the stipulation onto this to try to fix a situation before it happens so that they can be the same and we'll just cut it off at the pass.
This is Fred Wing again. I think I went over there last night and looked, the lights on the building look like they match all the other buildings around there because they're the small ones. It's the 3 that you mentioned that are up top. Those are the ones that, I mean, it's like an airport out there. It's super
Right.
bright.
And I haven't been out there from my building permit inspection. They looked to be what was approved. I don't know if they've been changed. I don't know if they've been adjusted. I'm not sure. So, we're trying to address it with the applicant, and they're going to work with us to try to reduce that glare.
Thank you for doing that. Appreciate it.
Yeah, this is Kelly Rast. And yes, I'm glad you're going to be working with it. But this is, I'm just going to reiterate the concern because as I'm looking at this picture right now, it is clearly not downward directional. I mean, there's a huge glare. And I think this is the concern. And since I'm on the planning commission too, with the, subdivision and all that kind of stuff, this is where we have to be really careful, and especially when we're talking Stillwell. The character of Stillwell is basically, even though it's not certified, it's a dark, the darkness is what people want. We don't have street lights. We don't have that. So it's very much a concern. And when we start allowing things to slip through the cracks, it's going to change the entire character of the neighborhood. And where being on this side of the table, and I know y'all do great work, but it does seem like reality doesn't always match what's discussed at this point when things are passed. And then we're in a conundrum, and it's the residents that kind of, take the hit for it, or I'm not really sure what happens, the reinforcement of that. So I'm once again going to reiterate the importance of the lighting in Stillwell, and that this has to be something that staff is over the top on if we're going to live up to the golden criteria. And again, we even in the planning commission brought this up too, because I know it's subjective. I know it doesn't have to follow exactly, but that is a huge characteristic of Stillwell, and many other applicants that have come before us have had to adhere to that. And at some point we have to be consistent. We have to have accountability, and reality has to match what is stipulated. And when I look at this picture, it would be hard for me to stand up and say that these lights passed, downward directional stipulations at the time that it was approved. So I'm not sure what's going on. I'm not a lighting expert, but someone needs to go in there and take a look, and there has to be justification and accountability and consistency to say what is correct and what is not, especially what is coming down the pipeline out in Metcalf as well. And I'm really, really, once again, going to urge staff to be considerate of Stillwell and the character of the neighborhood and any other area that's like Stillwell, where the lighting is a main issue and it's really infiltrating our community in not a good way. And again, the residents there's not the consistency. I don't feel like we're doing a good job on our end to make sure reality sets in, and every applicant is, basically subjected to the exact same things. So that really needs to be looked at.
Mr. Chair, I'm Jay Leipzig, just a planning director. One thing I was going to mention, the applicant has agreed to kind of look at some type of shielding, additional shielding. And I'm there again, I don't profess to be a lighting expert either, but with LED lighting, it's brighter. It tends to be brighter. There is additional spillage caused by those as well, but at the same time, expanding the shield, and they're willing to do that, kind of looking at it and figuring out a product that will work to mitigate that. So I do think we're obviously, we're very aware of it. The applicant is very aware of it, and we'll get it corrected as soon as possible.
Yeah, Kelly asked, and again, I appreciate that, but I guess the issue is and that's great that they're going to go back and put a shield on. My clarification is, how does something like this that does not match what was, approved with the downward directional? So then we have to do an aftermath. And again, I'm bringing this up because the next lighting that's going to go on in Metcalf, we're talking 70-foot poles and something far bigger. So I'm just really encouraging that maybe there's testing with some of this lighting stuff before it gets put on. And then, because it's also not fair to the applicant to then have to go back and put more money into something. Like, we need to figure this out before people are, doing things twice.
Commissioner, I will say that is part of the issue, kind of looking at that. Staff is aware of it. I do think that we certainly, when a building permit is submitted, so much is depending upon the spec that we certainly look at. But until we actually look at it when it's installed, unless they they bring in their own lighting expert, which a lot of companies are doing now. So we're certainly aware of it, and it is an issue. It's tougher even with LED lighting. That was my point. So.
And Kelly Ross, and I again agree with that, but until somebody brings up the issue, it kind of gets overlooked because once they get put in, unless somebody goes out there to actually approve them and look at them and check them out. But again, with the soccer complex, they could have been forced to go through a dark sky consultation where people knew what was going on. And that could have been a little safety net for everybody on both sides so that the lighting experts and the right stuff went on, but we chose not to enforce that. So I'm just, again, I wish staff would just really hold a hard line with some of the lighting stuff. And I'm glad you're going back and taking a look at it, but it was because someone, filed a complaint.
Well, Commissioner, just to your point again, that was approved by the Board of County Commissioners. So just knowing that.
This is Fred Winger.
I may have left barn.
Are the lights here required to be LED?
This is Michelle Leiniger. No, they're not, but it's recommended. They have in the staff report, it talks about what the lighting standards are. And there's some in the stipulations in addition to minimal in the regulations, which is more glare, downward directional, foot candles measured at the property line, foot candles measured at the center of public streets, things like that. And so generally these do meet. And what the other property installed is what was approved. They just added the little lights, which didn't create that spillage any more than what was there. So they installed what was approved for those large lights. They're just not, and I was out there, I took pictures of them. They were set up like they were supposed to be. I don't know if something has changed since then. So I also wasn't out there at night. So I think part of what we're struggling with, and we agree with you on tightening down those standards and making them more specific and clear. Things have really changed over the years since the lighting stuff was included. Technology has changed. And we just don't really have a lot to hang our hat on. And so I think with the site to the south specifically, I think there's some, with the topography along 210th Street and whether they got moved or any of that, I don't know that that's things that we could have addressed during the development review process. I think there's some things that we don't know as far as the LED technology and some of that stuff. So we really need more guidance too.
Mr. Chairman, Rod Richardson, I'm not going to pile on to this, but obviously as a concern of the board, I don't see this issue as that complicated. And my comments really go to your consultant. And they are these. I mean, you've got in this particular application, I have no problem with this application, but you've got in paragraph 12 of the exterior lighting, B, it says you have to have cutoff type of fixtures to direct the light down onto the property and not onto adjacent properties or adjacent streets. That rule is all you need. The problem here is you don't have a clear regulation that apparently makes that a hard rule that is going to be inspected post-construction unless they bring a lighting expert in to say it's not going to get there. Because if your consultant does not come to this community and drive around this community and look at every light that is blasting light off of the property with extraordinary glare, extraordinary lumens off-site, particularly on these more industrial type buildings where they have a massive lighting on the side that's lighting up everything but the parking lot. They need to drive around and look at this. And they simply need to ask themselves a question. What regulation would we have had to have in place to eliminate that problem on that building? And they're almost all the same. And that is, they didn't follow the rule you've got right here on your exterior lighting. You know, people have a right to light their property. There's no question about that. But as a practical matter, you've got a pretty darn good regulation here. I think it probably would be pretty much squared up with the dark sky stuff. The problem is, you know, we've got so many lights out there now that didn't have to comply with any of this. And these guys have massively bright lights on the side that are blasting light everywhere. Your consultant needs to go down, come to the city and drive around, particularly the Stillwell area, and then look at this and simply ask themselves, well, we can't do anything about that. It was pre-code, pre-whatever. But going forward, what would we have to do to make sure that does not happen again? For example, the problem we've got here apparently was, well, there's a change in elevation. And, you know, well, that isn't hard to figure out. That means you're going to have a lower light pole or higher degree of cutoff for that particular lighting to make it work. Or have a stipulation in here that if there is any direct visibility of the direct light source from off the property line, they're going to have to make that adjustment as part of the planning process. In other words, a continuing obligation to do that. I think if that were done, I mean, I don't see it as very complicated as like you look around at all of the stuff out there that is egregiously bright and shining on everybody else's property and figure out how you could have avoided having that in the first place. And I think if your consultants have not come to this area to actually physically drive around at night and look at these things and be prepared to address that, we're going to have a hole in these regulations and we'll be talking about this ad nauseum. So, but I mean, I think I'm looking at this thing, and what else could you ask? A direct light onto the property, not on adjacent properties or adjacent streets. That's about all you could legally ask for, short of maybe the, you know, wattage control or whatever. So that's my hope, that when your consultants are thinking about this and staff is thinking about it and the planning commission's thinking about it, that they just take a simple approach and say, look at all of the problems you can see out there and figure out what you would have had to have done to avoid that. And I think you solve your problem, and it's a question of enforceability. You've got the right standard.
Mr. Richardson, Jay Leipzig again. Just your point's well taken, and they are looking at that, and they're driving around the neighborhood or the Stillwell area during the evening as well. That's one of the points, is to look at it from a variety of different times of day to get an idea, kind of get an enhanced view of the area that they're planning for, and also best practices for dealing with some of these more recent, more modern fixtures as well. So yes, I appreciate your points. Well taken.
Mr. Chairman, Fred Winger, I had a question about the lots at the end that aren't part of this. Did you say those are retention, the ones at the, it would be the north, the two? Yeah.
You talking about these two? So Michelle Leiniger, this lot right here, which is just north of the landscaping, this is planned for a building and parking. This lot at the very peak is a detention basin.
Thank you.
Michelle, can we have for the agenda in January, just to follow up on the work that's been done over the next several weeks on the light?
For the enforcement.
For the lighting.
Yep.
Any other questions for staff? No. Thank you. Please. We'll now hear from the applicant.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Judd Clausen, Claussen, with Phelps Engineering, 1270 North Winchester. Olathe, Kansas, appearing on behalf of my client, the owner of the property and developer, MLBC LLC. Just some initials there, but a developer that, is developing this entire subdivision here. And the points are well taken on the lighting. Sometimes we go through all these designs and photometric plans and analyze these things. And when it comes to actually installing them and seeing them in real life, it doesn't, quite match up. So while engineering and planning and all that takes a hard look at things, there's sometimes things that have to be adjusted afterwards. And we recognize that. And my client is committed to working with staff and making as he's a partner in that existing development, it's a different LLC. That's this applicant, but he wanted me to express that to you, and we're in agreement with the stipulations moving forward. Again, happy to sit down with these plans at the time of building permit with that stipulation, review those, make sure that the best of our ability to look at this at the design level before it gets permitted is done, and then of course we have the checks at the end, and if it's not right, then we'll make it right. So wanted to mention that there was a late adjustment to one of the building elevations on the building at the south, the two buildings at the south end there. This is can you see this? Yeah, the elevations for those buildings. This is the north elevation of the one you see from the cul-de-sac of the street here. This is the west elevation, and this is the east elevation. The east elevation had a storefront and a little bit more wraparound of the brick or the stone and the stucco. They wanted to change that elevation on the east to match the one on the west. So that was submitted after the packets went out. I think it was earlier this week. It was something that we caught kind of last minute. We did make staff aware of this, and they encouraged us to just bring it to your attention tonight, just to let you know that we do plan to use this east elevation to match the west elevation on the plan. And I'll pull up the plan here. I don't know if I'm going to do this right or not. Yep, here it is down here. Okay, so this is the building elevations. So the north side is part that is you're driving down the street, you're seeing it would be this elevation here that we'd like to make to match the west elevation as well, if you're agreeable to that. So other than that, I didn't have any other additional comments. Thanks staff for working with us and getting through, the stipulations in the plan approval and stuff. But with that, I'll rest, and we are in agreement with the stipulations.
Any questions of the applicant from the board?
Mr. Chairman, I do have just a hypothetical question, but from an engineering standpoint, when these folks or anyone in a similar situation comes to you to design this, what are the considerations about exterior lighting? I mean, is there I've never quite understood, who makes the decision, is there some requirement for, I mean, anyone could do this without exterior lighting.
Sure.
But I don't know whether Phelps designed the lighting or somebody else did and it was added, but I'm curious to know if what considerations go into an owner deciding what kind of exterior lighting they want.
Mm-hmm.
I've never quite understood that, because some places it seems grossly excessive for what they need. And other times you see some of these buildings are basically almost not lighted at all. So just personal preference, or what's your thought about that?
So I can tell you this. So we hire a sub-consultant electrical engineer to do that, because we don't practice the lighting design and electrical design for these. So that was prepared by a mechanical, electrical, plumbing engineer. But in doing this the number of years that I have, I can tell you that the consideration is what is the ordinance of the city or county in this case, or the jurisdiction that is, the approving jurisdiction. What are those requirements to meet those? But then as far as light levels and stuff, more to your point, like some are a lot lower and others are higher. There's, I'll probably get the acronym wrong, but there's IES, International Electrical Society, or something like that, is a standard that kind of spells out what you should have in, like, certain commercial or office or retail areas as far as recommendations and such for that. So they'll look at that, and sometimes the insurance companies can drive that for making sure that whatever project you have is, adequately lit for liability reasons. Obviously, that's probably why some retailers are, fairly well lit, and maybe some other, maybe lesser known type businesses or offices that are maybe not national brands or something like that, that doesn't have the liability concerns, aren't really following necessarily those criteria. But there are third-party criteria that owners and insurance companies look at to make sure that those things are being, followed from that standpoint to protect the owner. And maybe that's something that the consultants might want to consider. I'm sure they're aware of it.
So that being the case, to your knowledge, do any of those standards require an owner to illuminate any property that they're not in control of? In other words, does that have to be, whatever you just talked about, whatever that standard is supposed to be confined to their property?
My understanding is that you are correct. It is just confined to their property, not supposed to be illuminating. There's no requirement from an insurance standpoint to illuminate somebody else's property or anything like that. And, several of the commissioners' comments tonight, I do feel it's the light source issue. You can see the light source. It's not necessarily a light level, because I bet, and we'll have a lighting engineer go back out and check with the instrument, what the light level is, but you can still see the source. So that's the issue that I think is causing the problem. But I'm speaking as someone that is not an expert as well on that, but
I just asked
some personal experience.
That's all I was interested in. But you really answered the question generally, and that is, whatever those standards are that are applied, or whatever standards the county ultimately comes up with, have to be corralled, so to speak, on the property, within the property lines. And to the extent that any of the light source is visible off-site, we've got a problem.
Right.
So whatever these regulations end up being in futuro, whatever they come up with, I would hope that they make it very clear that, do a good job on your property, but we don't want to see where that light's coming from. You can have a candle. We don't want to see the flame. Just, that's the problem. That's what is so disruptive to people is, you're having to look at the light source, and it effectively forcing their light onto your property because of that problem. So you hit it exactly right. It's the light source that's the issue.
Right. It's, there's a actual electrical engineer's definition for what glare is, but in layman's terms, it's, when your eye is attracted to it. So.
Thank you. Excellent.
Any other comments, questions of the applicant?
Kelly Ross, do you have the pictures that I have been forwarded for your own information for the client?
We do, and,
Okay.
and they were shared with me, and then I also shared them with my client.
Okay, great.
Let them know about it, and his construction man.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Great, thank you. We'll go ahead and open it for public comment. Do you have anything you wanted to participate in commenting? If you want to come on up to the mic. Maybe you just state your name and address.
My name is Mana Hayden, and I live in Kansas City, Kansas, but I happen to own property right across the street from whoever's building all of this. And my question was, wherever the picture went, how far is this from Metcalf? And is all of these buildings in front of what's already there? I don't know who I'm asking. You?
Actually, if the applicant want to respond, or staff.
Maybe you could put
The red brick buildings that are there now, are these buildings in front of that?
Let me show you here on the. Let's go to Judd Clausen again with Phelps Engineering. These are the lots where the buildings would be built on
Mhm.
these lots here. And then there are two buildings to the south here on these two lots that would also be built.
Where's the existing building?
There's an existing building right here that was just constructed, and I'm pointing just to the lot at the
I've
southeast
seen that
corner of
one.
210th and, okay. So-
But where's the other buildings that are, is that farther up here then?
Well,
Because I'm right here. I'm right here and I wanted to build a house, but thank you for listening to
Could
me.
you clarify where you say you're right here, but I
I
can't.
live, I don't live, I own property just south of 207th. And I own acreage back, and I've already heard from all the neighbors who live in the houses behind me. And again, I wanted to live in this area because I like the steel well darkness. I always have. But thank you for listening.
Thank you. Is there anyone on Zoom? All right. Having no one else in the audience, we'll go ahead and close the public opinion comment, public comment section. Any further questions, applicants, discussion among the board?
Mr. Chairman, I think this use for this area seems like a good use for this development. I think it fits the zoning for this area. If the lighting can be addressed, I support the development of the property in this manner.
Any other comments?
Mr. Chairman, Rod Richardson, I would agree with that. Obviously, we're all concerned about really one thing, and the lighting is part of it, and I think development's going to happen. There's no question about that. Nobody's going to stop it. It'll develop consistent with comprehensive planning and whatever. The trick here is whether or not the codes and the zoning requirements are effective at requiring the mitigation of negative impacts to surrounding property owners. And I think, to me, as a member of this board, just as a property owner, it's like, I understand people are going to develop things, but I think we really need to be really focused on, are there negative impacts? Are they unreasonable? I mean, nothing's perfect. Everything has some impact. We can't require everybody to have no lighting. I mean, but we can say, well, it's a negative impact to see the glare, to see the source. So principal part of our code responsibility is to identify and mitigate negative offsite impacts of whatever the use that's being proposed. I don't see any with this particular plan. It looks like, obviously, as Mr. Clausen pointed out, you can get all the consultants you want, but when you build it, there could be an issue that require adjustment later that could eliminate the potential for complaints. So I'll certainly support this, but my comments really go to, back to our consultant. And this is such a great time with the consultants and planning staff looking at the codes, looking at all of these things, that to me, almost everything boils down to successful identification and elimination of negative offsite impacts to the extent you reasonably can. And I think this plan meets that requirement, assuming the actual construction complies with that. So I would certainly support it if a motion is made accordingly. And I'll take the or, I guess. So, Mr. Chairman, I will move to recommend approval of the revised preliminary development plan and final development plan for Metcalf 211, fourth plat lots 1 to 5, and Metcalf 211 lots 13 and 14, located west of the intersection of 210th Street and Metcalf Avenue, for the reasons and including the stipulations listed in the staff report and the comments of the members of the board and Mr. Clausen. That's the motion.
Kelly Rast, second.
Can you add the lighting
And
vision and the
right, the light, and I would include in that, obviously, the requirement that the stipulations in particularly including exterior lighting, be met. And obviously that's going to have to be determined after it's constructed to make sure that it does in fact meet those plans, if that's what you're talking about here.
With the one addition.
Oh. And I would include in my motion, the additional stipulation that the time of building permits, at the time of building permits to be reviewed and approved by staff, revised lighting details for lots 1 through 5 to meet the requirements of Article 11 regarding light shielding and minimizing glare. I really wonder about minimizing glare. There should be no glare at all. So I would include in my motion, it's not minimizing glare, it's that light shielding to eliminate glare. That's my motion.
Kelly Rast, second.
All in favor?
Chairman,
Aye.
before you move on, are you wanting to include the elevation changes on lot 14 that the applicant has requested?
I would include that in my motion for the reason proposed by the applicant.
Just wanted,
That has to be reseconded, I think.
Kelly Rast, second.
Everyone in favor?
Aye.
This will go to county commissioners when?
this will go before the Board of County Commissioners for action on January 9th here at 111 South Cherry Street in this room at 9:30 a.m.
All right, great. Any other business before the board? And I also have one item. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Jay Leipzig, the planning director. I wanted to mention, we will follow up with you on the status of the, working with the applicant on the, providing shields or some kind of, device that will reduce or eliminate the glare. That's one item. We will follow up with you in January. The other item that I was going to mention, I forgot to, is I also have a summary report that's included in your packet this evening, not only for this zoning board, but also for the West Consolidated Zoning Board, and also the Johnson County Airport Commission. This is similar to the report that we provided the Planning Commission, but we're going to start distributing this to you too on a quarterly basis. That way you're aware of what the other zoning boards are doing, and you can
Very helpful.
keep apprised of that too. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, just one question to Jay. I did see at some point, and I don't require any long explanation, but I did see that the airport compatibility plan was adjusted.
Mhm.
And having spent about 15 years of my life in litigation with the county regarding development around the airport, et cetera, I'm simply curious as to what the guts of those changes were, just as a point of personal information.
Thank you, Commissioner. A great question, and I'd be happy to share that with you in more detail. We hired a consultant whose name escapes me right now, Kaufman Associates, who was over in Lee Summit, now they're in Overland Park, who have wide variety of experience in developing airport plans. The current plans address safety zones rather than land use characteristics. And so it's based on which safety zone particular project is in. It's a new approach. It's something that's kind of a best practice that's used all over the country. Already we've seen kind of a much better, it provides more flexibility for developers, but at the same time, the issue is on that safety zone, which zone it's in or the particular development is in, rather than looking at the land use characteristics, because that may change. And then that plan is obsolete. So it's a much more proactive approach to working with the airport compatibility. And I'd be happy to talk in more detail about it.
That's right. I can
pretty
certainly read
innovative.
it. But I guess the last question I have is, we're still in a situation where if land within the airport compatibility zone is in Olathe or Overland Park, they have to approve the rezoning for that, but then it finally comes back to the county commissioners to approve that zoning. So there's basically a problem there if one disagrees with the other.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, we're Jay Leipzig. We're not able to overcome that obstacle, unfortunately. However, we are also looking at some other things we could do to expedite that process through timing with the various applications with the cities and with the county, and how we can make that more seamless.
This is Michelle. I'm going to throw a couple things in there because I'm part of a lot of the application review The one thing with the airport review, the city deals with all of the regulations in their code. They deal with the review criteria. They deal with those characteristic standards and all this stuff. The airport commission and the board of county commission have a very finite review of the project based on its potential impact to the airport facilities and their flights. So it's not necessarily about the rezoning, it's about how the project could impact the airport. It's very specific in there, and based on state statute, I don't think we're ever going to get away from that. We're just in this process, we're going to try to streamline it to say, you know, if you have a preliminary plat and you bring forward a final plat and it matches the preliminary plat that we've already seen, could that be administrative? So we're trying to kind of tweak some of those in the back end, but the airport commission is very finite about what they're looking at as far as the review.
My recollection of being in 3 trials, 2 appeals, and a trip to the Kansas Supreme Court once or twice on this. And I remember the Supreme Court saying, this makes, you know, this is the ultimate Chinese puzzle, because you could have, you know, one agreeing and one disagreeing, and how do you ever resolve the issue? So anyway, I just thought it was great. It was being reviewed, and I know you'll never resolve that particular problem. You know, but having spent so much time on that, I was very interested in that. So I think I was very glad to see that review, because for a developer or landowner, it can present huge problems trying to get the value out of your property if you run into those issues. So anyway.
And I'll tell you that the new plan has very much helped us make easier conversations with those developers. Judd can probably speak to it, but I mean, there's completely less conflict between the cities and what the airport plans, because we are strictly looking at that safety aspect, and it's so much easier to explain and to review, and there's great criteria in there, and there's even there's a matrix in there that we look at, and then there's calculations you can do for the number of people based on the use and whether that's a safety issue. And so it's a lot of quantitative things that we can pull into there besides just the, you know,
Okay.
land use. So it's actually been great to use.
Well, I have no dog in that fight. Anytime that comes up, it catches my attention. I'll just put it that way. So I'm great. I'll be happy to read it when it's out there.
Second, other business, I wanted to let the board, have the board be aware of a lighting issue. The Loch Lloyd entrance over on Kenneth Street, the main entrance, we had a couple residents that had personally reached out to me, expressed an interest. I'm working with Sean and Diane. They reviewed the plans. There was no like extraneous lighting. Went out, took pictures I'll be sharing with them, but it is painful to look at the light. That's how bright it is. That it's so bright. It's a short lamp. It's an entranceway lamp that goes into it. It's the same lamp style that exists in the entire subdivision that's going in over there, but those aren't lit yet. But if it's anything like that entranceway lamp, it's going to be a disaster.
Wow.
So I know the Loch Lloyd folks, when they were here presenting the plans, they're very reasonable. So I expect that once we work with Sean, Diane, get the lights, get a conversation going, that'll get resolved. But I did want the board to know that that is underway or in process.
If Pat Mahomes objects to it, maybe he could just make him take it down.
That went through my mind too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not,
I believe, is it next Tuesday? We have at 2:00, our next meeting.
Yes, for these stakeholders is next Tuesday.
Just a reminder. Yeah.
All right,
Any other
advisory
business for
committee.
the board? Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Good
Thank
You
you.
want your Christmas crack to stay crunchy and less messy in the refrigerator or the freezer.
Thank you, Kelly.
These are very good. I've already gotten into them.